So I'm going to try and get through this episode as quick as I can, but I'm effectively going to be doing a live grade. So last week, Blackmagic announced the brand new URSA CINE 12K camera. This is really exciting, 12K footage. So I spoke to my friends at Team 2 Films again, Natalie and Leon, and they very kindly provided me with an edit that they've done. So I'm going to grade that in this episode and show you exactly how I would grade the brand new URSA CINE 12K footage and also see how it stands up. So let's take a look at what we've got. Here is the edit. So it's just a short one, but I'm going to grade through it anyway. And here's the footage. As you can see, we've got some 12K. It also shoots in 8K and 4K. So I've got a bit of 8K as well, but I'm going to focus today just on 12K. So first of all, let's just play it back. And you see that's playing back really smoothly on my timeline. Obviously there's no grade on it yet, but we will test that performance as well. So let's just have a look at the metadata here. So we can see it's Blackmagic RAW and 24 frames a second, and it's 12K. So I'm going to go to my settings and show you what settings I need. Let's go to the color page. I've got my scopes already highlighted for you up here, and I'm going to go to my settings and show you exactly what I've got set here. Now, obviously I can't monitor in 12K. There is no 12K monitor. My timeline resolution doesn't have to be 12K either. Until I actually export this, I'm not going to export it in 12K, I'm going to export this in Ultra HD. But when I'm working to keep the speed going, especially with this being raw 12K, I'm going to bring this down to 1920 by 1080. And don't forget, you can change that after when you do the delivery. Everything upscales correctly. So even if you've drawn shapes and all that sort of stuff, it all gets remapped. So I'm going to match my video monitoring. Let's make that 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to say okay, but just before I do that, I'm going to just show you my color management settings as well. So let's go to the color management here, and I'm not using the automatic color management. I'm using regular DaVinci YRGB, and I'm going to apply what's called color space transforms. I've got plenty of episodes on what they are, but you're going to see me do it live in this episode. So my timeline color space is not the default. I've set it to DaVinci Wide Gamut. And my output color space for this episode is going to be Rec. 709 Gamma 2.4 because that's what my monitor is set to. If your monitor is set to 2.2, then you set that to 2.2. And one other setting that I always change in the color management is the 3D lookup table interpolation. And by default, that's set to trilinear, which is not as good quality in general as tetrahedral. However, there is a slight performance decrease in tetrahedral mode. So I'm going to press save. And let's just take a quick look at what footage we've got. So the first thing I do when I'm grading and setting a look is get a good shot to start with. So we want a nice medium shot, something like this would be fine. Let's just play it through and see what happens. Yeah, so this would be a good shot to start on. It's shot number 1 anyway. So where do we start to actually grade this footage? Well, I'm going to use my fixed node tree. So this is available in the description of all my YouTube videos. You sign up to my free email newsletter, and in there is a link to this node tree, or you can just build your own in a similar style. It's already here, but if I just delete that, I'm going to show you how to actually import it. So if you download it from the link, you can then right-hand click in here and say import, and then point to the DPX file on here. You get 2 files and say import, and it appears here. So to apply the fixed node tree, you can middle mouse click or simply drag and drop it on. Let's just clean up the node graph by right-clicking. And this is my fixed node tree. You can build this yourself if you want to, but basically it starts here with the camera profile going to DaVinci Wide Gamut. So this is our color space transform up to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and this is our color space transform back down again. Now this you don't need to change. This is always DaVinci Wide Gamut down to Rec. 709. You just need to have an eye on which gamma you want to be on, so whether you want to be on 2.2, 2.4, P3, HDR, whatever you're going to. That is set fine, but what we need to do here is on our first one is tell the input color space what the camera source was. So if we go to here, we're going to say it is Blackmagic Design and it's Wide Gamut Gen 4.5 and it is Film Gen 5. I know that because Leon has told me that. So we're now looking at this in the correct color space in Rec. 709. I'm viewing this not in camera color space, this is in display color space. So just interrupting this video quickly, if you're a complete newbie to this and you don't understand color space transforms or color management, I've got 3 really good videos that are absolute beginner's guides to color management. I'll put a link to those in the description. And also, if you don't understand this node tree, bear in mind that these nodes have not got anything on them at all yet. You can just do this with serial nodes as well, but I've got an episode that explains exactly how this node tree works. Now, a couple of changes I'm going to make to the end. The first thing we do is get rid of this. This was my Kodak 2383 film LUT, which is taken from DaVinci Resolve, but I'm going to delete that because I'm not going to use that in this episode. I'm going to use Film Look Creator. So what I'm going to do when I create the look here is only work with features that are in DaVinci Resolve. I'm not going to use any third-party plugins. I often use Mononodes, I use Dehancer all the time. I've got discount links to those in the description, by the way, if you are interested in those, but I'm going to do it all fairly just using DaVinci Resolve features. Now, I am going to use studio features. So what I'm going to do is get rid of that Kodak LUT on the end. Now, there is something that I've been experimenting with lately, and it's freely available on the internet. If you go to github.com and look up Juan Pablo Zambrano, he's done a fantastic DCTL, which is called JP2499. So what is this doing? Well, what it does is it takes our end node here, our DaVinci wide gamut to 709, and if you have a look in here, you've got all this tone mapping stuff going on here, and it can be quite confusing what to actually set this to. And discovering this DCTL, I actually think the results in general so far, and I'm still trying it out, but seem to give me a more pleasing result than this actual color space transform here. So I'm going to start playing with it. I'm going to use this as a good experiment for it, just to show you what it is. So you can download this for free. I'll put a link to it in the description as well. And what I'm going to do is reset that node, and I'm going to apply a DCTL. Now, you do need DaVinci Resolve Studio in order to do this. I'm going to move these over, go to my DCTL. I have done episodes on how to install DCTLs, but you basically want to throw them into your LUTs folder, your lookup tables here. And if you open this LUT folder, that's where you want to place them. So in here, I've got JP2499 DRT, and the input here is set to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and my output Rec 709 Power 2.4. Now you have got 2.2 in there, you've got lots of other ones as well. So I'm just in the early stages of trying this out, but at the minute I really like its results. It gives a slightly different look than the regular CST, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. So let's just change the label on that, and we'll call that JP2499. So all that's effectively doing is taking us from DaVinci Wide Gamut down to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, but in a slightly different way with different tone mapping. All right, so we need to start grading this shot up. So let's find a better starting point somewhere around about there. And I'm going to go to my first item here, which is balance and exposure. Now, I do this generally in the HDR tool here. And let's have a look at our exposure settings. We need to lift this up a fair bit. I could do this because it's Blackmagic RAW. I could actually do it in the RAW settings here, so you've got exposure, but I'm going to do it in the HDR tool. I'm just keeping an eye on my grading monitor, and let's just get that exposure set somewhere good. And the white balance, we've got very mixed lighting going on here, so the white balance needs some adjustment here. So I'm going to use my global balance here. Again, there's several different ways you can do this. There's lots of different ways you can do this, but let's just have a look what we can do here. Something like that. I'm just going to switch that on and off. That is clearly in a better starting point. And let's just leave that there for now, because what I want to do now is start playing with our look development. I want this on at an early stage so we can grade underneath it and get our shots looking really good. So I'm going to use Film Look Creator. I'd normally use Dehancer here. And if we go to this last node here, or the second to last node, I'm just going to relabel this look. So it was called spare, I'm just going to call it look. Just so you know what's going on here, by the way, these first three is where I set my balance and exposure and contrast and get everything looking in a great place. It should be looking really good by then. Then it branches off into this little string of parallels, and this is where I do either secondary work, color warper, curves, but even things like color temperature, and I might mess around with the HDR settings, adjusting whites and darks and things like that. I like this to be branched off from this good starting point. So this is how my fixed node tree works. I've then got a trim pass here. This is to allow me to make little changes after that. I might just want to add a little bit more contrast or a little bit more balance. That would be done on this node here. Then I've got my power windows, which we're going to look at shortly. Then I've got this one called texture, which we're going to look at. So that's things like adding a contrast pop, texture pop, that sort of thing. Just little bits that just give it a little bit of dynamism. And then we've got our look. So I'm going to go to my effects. I'm not going to use Dehancer. I'm going to use Film Look Creator. So let's go and find that. And it's there. So I'm going to drag and drop this on. First thing you need to do is get rid of the default look that it puts on there, because I'm not going to use that. So I go to this thing called Clean Slate. I've done 2 episodes on Film Look Creator, so I'll put a link to those in the description as well. And then what you need to do is just dial in a bit of Film Look, and then these menus become active. So I'm going to go straight for Rochester because I've already played with this quite a bit and I like what it does. I'm going to dial in. So this is full and this is less. So I'm just looking at my grading monitor, and I think full amount is too strong. So I'm going to bring that back somewhere around about there. And skin bias, I'm just going to nudge it up a little bit so we take a bit of that effect out of her skin. Let's just see what that's doing, and it is giving it a really nice look, but I don't want it to be too strong at this point. The other thing I do here is I put a little bit of subtractive saturation in there, just a little bit. I don't want to add too much of this extra stuff at this point because this is going to be a global look across the whole edit. I can fine tune it if I want to, but I like to have that set and just leave it. And then I grade everything underneath it, all my balancing, my contrast, my exposure, all the things that are here would be done at clip level. But let's just add a little bit of subtractive saturation because it gives it a nice look. And the other thing I'm going to add here is halation and bloom. Normally I would run this on separate nodes, but I'm just going to apply it here just for speed really. And you need to take it right back. If you look at her hair here, if I just zoom into that a little bit so you can see what's going on, you can see that halation, if I take it on and off, is really quite strong. By default, the Film Look Creator halation is strong. So I'm going to knock that right back down to here. And let's bring the radius down a little bit. And let's put a little bit of bloom on as well. I like a little bit of bloom. Again, I'm going to bring it back. And let's just put that on and off. And that's looking really good as a starting point. So what we're going to do now is finish off our initial balance and just check that this look and our initial balance are complementing each other. So let's go back to the balance node now because we need to just adjust this. Now we've put a look on it, we need to just compensate a little bit with our balance. And so what I'm going to do is go to my primary wheel here and I'm going to just gamma a little bit. I just want to cool it off a little bit, and that's looking much better like that. I'm going to pull a little bit of green out in my offset. And oh, there's no point doing that, it's such a big change, but that is looking much better than it was a second ago. So the next thing we need to look at now is contrast. And looking at my waveform here, we can bring the blacks down a little bit here. So I'm going to my primary, let's just bring that down. I'm using the panel, by the way, so if you keep an eye on here, on lift and gain, or we could use gain and offset, something like that. So it's starting to look really good. Now we did a little bit of subtractive saturation in the look development in the Film Look Creator. So my next node saturation may not actually need anything. And looking at my vector scope, we've got really nice spread of saturation going on there. We've got really nice color contrast going on. But let's just see what happens if I add a little bit anyway. So I'm going to go to my HDR wheel. Let's just add a little bit of saturation here. I don't think this actually needs anything, so I'm actually going to just reset that. I'm just going to leave it as it is. I think there's plenty of saturation going on in there. So if you do enjoy this sort of content, think about subscribing. I don't ask very often. Hit the notification bell as well. I've also got my 4-day live masterclass going to be announced very soon. So if you hit the notification bell, you'll find out when my live stream is, when I tell you all about it. There's also a link in the description at the bottom to my email list. You'll get notified there, and you can access this node tree if you haven't got it already. And that's all I want to say really. So moving forward now, we've got a really good starting point here, so I can move into this row of parallels. So I'm going to have a look at temperature. I don't know if it actually needs anything, but let's just tweak it anyway and see what happens. I'm kind of doing this live, so let's just see what happens. Just play around with it. That is looking pretty good around about there. Let me just switch that node on and off. Yeah, that is actually looking better, so that's good. These are labeled HDR warper curves. They don't have to be that. These are just ideas. It's just labels to remind me what I might want to consider. HDR, I'll be looking at doing things like adjusting white balance in highlights and things like that, shadow work. The warper, I use a fair bit. I like the warper. Curves here, we could use curves here to actually have a look at those lights. So these green lights up here are a little bit annoying for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Hue versus Hue, which I'm already on. I'm just going to move my scopes out the way slightly. And I'm just going to take a sample of this here. And first thing to do, let's just get that spread nice and wide so we don't cause any breaking in the image. I'm just going to pull that down and just see what happens. And actually, taking the green out of those lights, they were naturally green, is giving us a much more pleasing image. That's got a really nice look to it. Let me just switch that on and off. Yeah, I'm really pleased with that. So the next thing we could look at is, I don't need to do any trimming here, but I might want to look at putting a power window in. So let's take here and let's just draw a shape around her and see what that gives us. So I'm going to go to my windows here. I need to move my scopes again, sorry. Click on here. And what I do now is I just need to reduce the size of this so I can go outside a little bit. So I'm going to bring that down to 75%. I've got a little thing on my desk that allows me to do that with a little wheel. Something like that. Plenty of softness, always plenty of softness. And then we're going to invert that. And well, I have several tools I can do this with. I tend to use the offset tool here, or gamma. Just bring that down slightly. I'm going to switch that on and off. I'm looking at my grading monitors because I don't have these outlines showing on there, so I can see it really easily. It's a little bit heavy, so I'm going to bring that back up a little bit. Something like that. So what else might we put on here? Well, I've got one here called texture. This is where I'm going to experiment. Maybe I think something like contrast pop might be nice here. Let's pull these scopes back down and let's go to our effects and take this one. Contrast pop is one that I really like using. I'm going to apply it on here. Sometimes I'll put a glow on here or something like that, some light flares or something, but I'm going to add a little bit of contrast pop. So really, you need to be subtle with this. I'll show you, just moving it to 0.113 gives us that. It's too strong. Let me just put this back to full size so you can see it. So that is way too strong. So let me just reset that and just dial it in very carefully. Enable and disable. You need to be careful of on her jumper here. She's got a pattern. So something like that. So I think we're in a really good place here. What I'm going to do is just take off that. I'm going to highlight all of the middle items, including the film look. So I'm just leaving on here the CST up to DaVinci Wide Gamut and the JP 2499, which is taking us DaVinci Wide Gamut back to RIC 709. And I'm going to enable and disable so we can see before and after. And I think that is a massive improvement. So that is Option D on your keyboard. So before we move on too far, let's have a look at how this looks on some of the other shots. So I'm going to take this shot here and just apply. Bear in mind, we've got a power window going on here, and also our temperature and balance might need adjusting on a shot-by-shot basis. So let me take off the extra contrast. Let's take off the curves here. And I'm just really having a look that this look that we've built here is working. I really like what it's doing to the reds there. I really like this color contrast going on here. The other thing I want to see now is how this plays back. So we've got the URSA CINE 12K. I just want to play this back and see how well it plays. And we're actually getting real-time performance. So what I'm going to do is copy that across here to this shot. Let's see how that looks. That actually looks great straight away. The only thing I need to check here is my power window, so we can get rid of that in this one. I don't need it on this shot, but actually that's looking great. So let's go to this shot here. And again, this is looking really good. Again, I've got the shape on here. That is actually pretty well placed. Actually, let me just tweak that a little bit. I might as well borrow that. And what I need to check in here is these curves are probably not actually doing anything because they were affecting the green. So I'm going to take those off. And if I go to my balance and exposure, this does need adjusting a little bit. So I'm going to go to my HDR tool here. Let's just pull up that a slight amount there. And probably in my contrast, just adjust that a little bit as well. I could reset these and start from scratch, but for this episode, I'm just going to adjust them slightly here. And let's just see if this color temperature thing is actually doing anything. Yeah, that's fine as it is. And the texture, that's great. So what that texture is doing is actually adjusting that light a little bit as well, which is great. So that red light that we've got going on there, I would love to just bring that down with some density. So I'm going to go onto one of these tools here. So let's just go to the warper. I'm going to rename it because I'm not going to call it a warper. And what I would normally do is I would go to my effects, I would bring a DCTL in like this. And normally I would use Mononodes for this, so let's just see what that does look like. So I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to put some density in there. Yeah, it looks great. And some saturation and density like so. But to be good for my word, I'm not going to use any third-party plugins, so let's reset that. And we can do this using Color Slice, for example. So I'm going to here, there's my red density, and we can add density in there and a little bit of saturation. But as you can see, that's slightly breaking up, so it's not giving me quite as good look as the Mononodes did. So I'm going to reset that. And another way we could do that is with a curve. So we could go into here and do our hue versus loom, like so. Let's take a sample of that. Again, make it nice and fat there. I'm doing this quite quickly, and then we can just pull that down, and that gives us a kind of similar look. Now that should match this shot here. That looks great. This shot here, let's just take our starting point, see how it looks, and we need to look at her skin tone here. Yeah, it's completely different. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to take my balance and exposure, and I'm going to go to my HDR tool, and I'm just going to warm this up a little bit. Something like that. And I'm keeping an eye on the skin line. Now what I normally use here to check my skin tone is I've got my omniscopes, or I go to my timeline node and apply another DCTL from Mononodes. This is the utility one. I've done an episode on this as well. It's called Balance, and that shows you what skin tone looks like. And the beauty of this is I can go to my light box and I can update all my thumbnails, and I can see exactly what her skin tone is doing. So these are all nice and matched. So when it's yellow, it means it's sitting on the vector line. When it's slightly green, it means you're towards green and towards magenta. So we're clearly a little bit too magenta on this one. But what I'm going to do is take that off, because I did promise I wouldn't use it. I'm only going to use things that are available in Studio. So what I'm relying on is my vector line here on the vector scope. So I'm going to go back to my balance here, and we just need to warm it up very slightly. Something like that. And let's see how that looks. In fact, let's just play that through. Again, we're playing back 12K, so this is the URSA CINE 12K. That's all playing in real time. And that's looking great. Okay, again, I just need to update my thumbnails. You sometimes get this, I don't know why they're not updating very well. It's been since about version 19. I find that these don't update that well. So that's the first 5 shots done. Let's just finish it off. We've got an exterior here. This, I would imagine, is going to need some separate balance work, but I'm going to copy the first look, because that has got our JP 2499 on it. It's also got our look going on. The texture pop, the contrast pop, I'm going to keep on there, hoping it's kind of all right. I'm going to take off the power window, and I'm going to reset the balance and exposure. So first thing I'm going to check is my exposure. That needs to come right down, looking at my waveform, and we need to warm that up a little bit. I still want that nice sort of cold look that we've got going on. I really like the colors that are going on in the scarf here. Let's just check my contrast. In fact, this could probably do with a little bit of saturation. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to change my color space to HSV. Sorry, I'm thinking kind of out loud here. I'm going to go to my channels. So I'm going to take off channel 1. I'm going to take off channel 3. So we're only left with S, and I'm going to use my primary gain. So if you look down here, I'm doing it on my panel. And then just see if that's better or worse. That is really subtle, but it looks great. Something like that. Let's just check if this temperature that I've brought in from clip number 1 is working. And what else does it need? This curve is probably not needed. Nope, we can get rid of that. And I'm going to put a little power window on here as well. Let's go into here. Let's draw a quick shape. I'm doing this really quick now, because I'm aware of how long this episode is going to be otherwise. Let's invert that. Let's go to here and adjust our offset. Something like that. Again, I'm looking at this on my output monitor so I don't get those lines. Again, that's too strong. Let's just put it back up a little bit. Something like that. Let's just play that shot through. That looks great. Now this hopefully matches this one. Let's just see it going from one to the other. It's looking great. That probably needs a bit of exposure work, so let's just bring the exposure down a little bit in here. But you get the idea of how I'm working here. Something like that. Looking at my scopes, let's just compare that to the shot before. Probably this shot. It's a little bit magenta still, but you get the general idea. Let me just pull it down a little bit. Something like that. And then our final shot is at night. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to grab straight from our interior. Wow, okay, that's quite a look going on there. I really like that. But let's just adjust our exposure. I'll use my HDR tool. Let's bring that up. That looks great. But we probably, again, don't need the curve. Nope. And the temperature, let me just check. That's helping. The power window, again, let's just make it a little bit smaller. Easy way of doing that, just goes to sizing. Like so. And if you press shift, you can actually access multiple points and just pull them down like so. It's a really nice trick. I think that's about it. So let's play it back from the beginning. So I think just this shot here needs some work. Let me press that. This just needs warming up a little bit, and probably needs a little bit more exposure to bring it down, something like that. But you get the general idea. So I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing out of the Blackmagic URSA CINE 12K. This is the first time I've graded with it. We had some quite testing footage there. So this shot particularly was very mixed lighting, quite difficult to deal with, but it's behaving really well. I've got interiors, exteriors, and night shots going on. I'm getting really good response on my playback. So we've got quite a few nodes going on there, and it's looking great. So I'm really pleased with it. I'd just like to say thanks again to Team 2 Films. Go and check out their video that talks all about the camera itself and how it works. It's a fantastic video. I'll put a link to that in the description. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.